This is the Soul-Filled Sisterhood podcast, and I'm your host, Nicole Burgess, licensed marriage and family therapist and an empowerment coach for women. The information shared in this podcast is not a substitute for seeking help from a licensed mental health professional. Now here is today's episode. Episode 77. And before we dive into today's episode, I invite you to go out to NicoleBurgessCoaching.com/assessment and see if perfectionism is holding you back. No, this assessment is not a psychological test or anything like that, but it does give you an idea about whether or not some perfectionist thinking or behaving is holding you back in your life. So go out to NicoleBurgessCoaching.com/assessment and see where you stand. All right, here is today's episode. Welcome, sisters. In today's episode, I'm going to talk about being an HSP and how I think we are gentle and we can be fierce. It's not a one or the other. How often what I see with women that I work with, old belief systems from their younger years, right, their adolescent years, are still running things, and how it's time to get curious with those thought processes so that you can emotionally grow into the adult that you are and think as an adult, not come from this place of a worried or a scared adolescent girl, because you are incredibly powerful. So a few weeks back, I got really fired up about some things. I know I said I was going to take the month of December off, and some things kind of struck a chord. And so I wanted to come on before the new decade came to fruition here. What happened a few weeks back? I was watching some comments on social media and hearing some things from my clients about the holidays and how they were dealing with the holidays, how others thought they weren't doing things either correctly or the way they used to or the way that they thought they should. Remember that quoted should do it. And there was a lot of frustration, and frankly, it was a lot of judgment that was going on. And what was coming up for me, I was just watching how as humans, we judge. We just absolutely do. And it sucks at times. And it's also an opportunity to get really curious about when you get triggered by something or you react to something. And I talk a lot about coming from a place of responding versus reacting. But when you're reacting to something, it's time to pause and get curious, like, what am I making this to mean to me? And so some of the comments that I was hearing is, I know you lost your husband, your mother, your dad, your partner, somebody, and that they wanted to do a specific ritual the same way, or they thought they needed to celebrate on a certain day. And this was all before I released episode 75 on holidays and doing things out of obligation versus love and joy, or how you navigate a loss during the holidays. So when I was listening to these comments and I was helping my clients navigate through what was coming up for them and how they can set some boundaries with some of their relatives and their friends regarding, hey, you stay in your lane, I'll do mine, and things will work out much better, and I can do it compassionately, and I can do it with really assertive boundaries. And I was pausing and reflecting of how I still have moments at times in my life where perfectionism that gets in my way. And so what I do is I can project that onto others. And then I pause and I go, oh, wait, that's my stuff. That has nothing to do with what they're doing. Just the behavior that they're doing is now giving me an opportunity to say, what is it that I need to do differently in my life, if anything? And one of my things is, I like to talk about getting out of your comfort zone and stretching yourself. And I still have times where I find myself really playing small. And the podcast is one of these areas where I know there are times I hold myself back and I don't think I am direct enough, for there's a fear of I'm going to offend somebody. And if I do, the beauty of all of this is you can just turn it off. You can unsubscribe and just not listen ever again. And so be it. So one one of my goals over the next year or so is to become even more bold, even more fierce on these podcasts. And today I want to talk a little bit more about how as HSPs we can do both. And again, each one of you is an adult and you can make your own decision on whether you want to listen, not listen, follow somebody, not follow somebody. That's the beauty of being an adult. So in episode 2, I talked quite a bit about the good girl mask or the good girl persona. And I roll up, I know some people really resonate with the good girl, some people resonate with people pleasers, and perfectionism really hit home with many of you. And I did that series. It was episode 72 through 74. So if you haven't listened to it, feel free to go back and listen to it. And as I said at the very beginning of this podcast, I really encourage you to go out and actually do the assessment. No, it is not a psychological assessment. It's something I've kind of come up for all the things that I talk about so much with my clients and how they can become more of a recovering perfectionist versus staying stuck in that and not let perfectionism run their life. There's an assessment that you can take, and so go out to that link. Anyways, when I'm talking about being gentle and fierce, gentle to me is you can totally be compassionate, and the fierceness is being direct in what you mean and not backing down where you become like a doormat in a sense where you don't put your boundaries up, that you're so afraid of hurting other people's feelings you forget you in the whole process. That's not being fierce. It's loving yourself enough that you can set that boundary. It's loving yourself enough and believing in yourself enough that it's okay to ask for what you need. It doesn't mean you're always going to get what you ask for. Even if it's fair, doesn't mean you're going to get that. But knowing you have the ability to ask for that. And how that shows up in my work with clients is, I tell people when I do my intakes, I'm not everybody's cup of tea. And if you like coffee like I do, I'm not your specific flavor maybe. Because part of that is I do hold people accountable for what their goals are and where they want to go. And if old stories are getting in your way, we're going to address it. We're going to talk about it. Because often what that means is when these old stories are getting addressed, what I've found over the years of being a therapist and now coach is that some of the mindset that comes forward is really from when you were an adolescent. So back episode 17, I talked all about, breaking through your limiting beliefs. Well, what will happen is if you have not gotten curious about why you do what you do, why you think the way you think, and you're not raising stuff from the unconscious to the subconscious stuff, or that is with no filters, that's just how you operate the majority of your life. If you're not bringing that forward up into your consciousness, odds are you're still operating a lot of areas of your life as if you're that adolescent girl. And when I work with women, that's what we do. We really start to unravel some of those old belief systems so that they can ask for the raise. They can even ask or know how to work on negotiating a salary. They can charge more for their services. They can actually put money back for retirement. They can have more time with their kids. They can actually do something that's just for them and not for anybody else and feel good about it, not guilty about it. They know how to take vacations. They know how to connect with their loved ones. They also know how to say no and not need to defend themselves or justify that 2-letter word. Often what happens is if you are operating from more of an adolescent mindset, that younger girl kind of thinking and processing, you're in self-preservation mode. So that may have worked as an adolescent, but it's not typically going to work as an adult unless you are in like a war situation and self-preservation, trying to survive day in and day out. That's what you're doing. That's it. Then you're going to be operating from an adult side, just truly trying to survive. Or if you are in an unsafe environment in general, then you're probably still in that self-preservation mode. Doesn't mean you're operating from an adolescent mindset, but that you're just trying to survive day to day. But I know for the majority of people that I work with, that is not the case. What they're doing, though, is they're self-preserving in a way that they're not taking risks, they're not stating their needs, they're not taking downtime so that they don't feel overwhelmed because they're so afraid of what other people may think or how they may respond to it or even react to it, which then means they're surviving life, but they're really not thriving in life. And it's also playing small because it's, quote, safe, even though it's really miserable. I remember working with a lady a while back, and we were talking about her relationships and how perfectionism really impacted her marriage. And the one thing she realized as we were working together, she's like, oh my gosh, I totally now get it. I have not been stating what my needs were for fear of how my partner, my husband, may think about this, and that if I actually state this need that I wanted, which I don't remember what it was, but she was afraid that her husband would think that by stating, I know, she wanted a little more time away, and maybe take a vacation by herself, that would equate in his head that she wanted a divorce, that she didn't love him. And she had no facts to back it up, but that was such a fear that she didn't state it to him. And I said, well, we'll never know unless you actually say something to him about it. And then he can tell you his side of the story. He can tell you how he perceives it or what he hears from you. And she realized that part of where that hesitation was coming from was growing up and not having her own voice, or when she did state her needs, she was often told like they weren't important, that she was an adult, you're a kid, you're to be seen, not heard, or she was just truly dismissed. And so that mindset was running her adult relationships, and that wasn't serving her. And they wanted to grow better as a couple, but they were really struggling. And so she recognized her part of it and how she could do that differently. And when I work with women like this, I can totally hold them in so much compassion as they come to these aha moments, these insights, and I can cheer them on, and, we can really set in like, hey, you're growing up, and now you're letting that adolescent girl, she just gets to observe now. And if somebody is coming to me and they keep doing the same, I'm going to hold them accountable. I'm going to be more, quote, fierce about it. It's not being aggressive and calling them out and saying they suck as a person. That to me is aggressive. That's not what I'm saying when I'm saying being fierce. It's like, sounds like there's that old story coming up again, like you're not enough and you can't do this, or whatever that fear is. That to me is being fierce. And it's standing in your, quote, bold self, so that you are the you in your relationships. You're the adult you, the authentic you. It's not hiding behind the armor anymore. I know for some of my friends, they like the word warrior. When they talk about this fierceness, that's the image that comes up for them. And the warrior doesn't resonate for me. Because like I said a few seconds ago, Brené Brown talks quite a bit about, we can hide underneath the armor. And the word warrior to me is as if you're going into battle. And I don't believe when people are working on a relationship and they're working for a deeper connection, that there's a battle there. I think there's two people in a we relationship, and I usually, do a little heart symbol around that they're trying to work through something. And that can be with a parent and a child, that can be with, a peer-to-peer. And a warrior to me is like you're going into battle. You've got your sword and you're underneath all this armor and your shields, and you're trying to keep out the so-called bad or negative. And I think every time that we are leveling up, we're challenging our old belief systems. And again, oftentimes they're outdated belief systems. But I think we need to actually take the armor off, because that's how the joy and the love actually comes in. That's how you do the receiving of love. And that's how you bring more joy into your life, is when you don't have the armor on. So when you've let that armor off, part of that mindset starts to shift, because you know that it's like, I can assert myself and I can also love other people. I can also love myself and set boundaries. I can be fierce in following my values and not wavering from them. I can be fierce and loving to others without them loving me back. So I want you to recognize that it's not this either or, again, that duality thinking. It's the non-duality thinking. It's the both and. If you've got a part of you, again, that younger self, that good girl who wants to run things, it's often more, again, like your adolescent self trying to run it. And if that's the case, what typically happens is when the young girl is running things, there's going to be a lot of fears and worries that come up, because adolescents are looking towards adults oftentimes for that guidance and saying, hey, the world is okay, we're going to get through this, all that good stuff. But as an adult, if that younger part of you is running things, she's looking outside of herself for that validation. and you already have the answers inside of you. If you're trying to learn a skill, read about it, ask for help, do what you need to do so you can learn the skill. I like to go back to Amelia Earhart, one of her quotes that I really love that's in my at-home office. She talks about the paper tigers. And I often think that, if my adolescent self, when she's running things or she tries to, she's got all kinds of paper tigers, or if you want to call them the inner fear gremlins that come up. But as my adult self, I recognize those very quickly. And I'm like, okay, what's my next step? What's my next action that I need to take so that I can keep moving forward and not let the fears or old beliefs run me, that I keep upgrading my mindset, I keep upgrading my belief system, knowing that ultimately you're truly unlimited. So I hope this was helpful for you today. And if you've not listened to the Perfectionism series, I'd encourage you to do that, 72 through 74. You can also go out to NicoleBurgessCoaching.com/assessment and take that perfectionism assessment. Again, not a psychological test or anything, but it's giving you some insight or maybe raising your awareness of where you may be stuck in your life and how you can get unstuck. Also, I've had some people let me know they are curious about having a possible course on perfectionism, and so I'm in the process of doing that. But you have to be on my mailing list to get the inside scoop and the initial rate that it will be offered at once I have it created. And I would love your input into this as well as I go about the creation process. So once you do the assessment, you sign up for the email as well, and we'll go from there. The second step I'm going to ask you to do, or action step, after today's episode, this is really part of why I also wanted to do this, was because we're coming to the end of a decade. And I've really been thinking about all the things that I've accomplished and done and gone through over the last decade. And I do this every year. I kind of reflect back on the year and see where I've been and where I've come and all that other good stuff. But a decade is amazing. All the things that can change. And many of the motivational speakers that I follow and coaches that I follow and all that stuff, they talk so much about when you stay focused on one thing per year, you can really accomplish a lot. And it's absolutely true. And when you look back at a decade, I think to me, it really kind of blew my mind, everything that I've done over the decade. So I'm going to encourage you to do the same thing in your own life. Give yourself half hour, an hour, get your journal out, and reflect back on where you've been since 2010 and where you are now. I know some of you have launched children. Some of you have lost a parent or a loved one. Some of you have lost pets. Some of you have moved. Some of you have changed jobs. Some of you have opened businesses. Whatever it may be, write down those accomplishments that you have done, and maybe even write down the things that you have forgiven, the people you have forgiven, including yourself, for old thoughts that you had of yourself or of others. Look at how far you have come, and then look at where you want to continue to go, being intentional about what you want to do in 2020. So an example of this, again, I think I've talked about this in a previous episode. I cannot remember. I know in one of my trainings when I was still in grad school and I was volunteering at the Suicide and Crisis Hotline, one exercise that we did was about, if you only had X number of years left to live, what would you do? We had to write down things that we didn't want to live without. And I think there were people. And I had a couple of them. They're like, and if you lost those two things, what would happen? And it just really got us thinking about what we wanted to do in our lives, create in our lives, and be very intentional about it. So again, as a very gentle and fierce HSP, it's really looking at, is your life where you want it to be? Are you living the lifestyle that you want? When I say lifestyle if you're wanting more ease in your life, if you're wanting more harmony in your life, do you have that? And if not, what's one step that you can do, or what's one action you can do over the next year to make more of that come closer to what you're really wanting? That's where I think coaching can really be helpful for folks. Life coach, business coaching, all of that can be very helpful. So if you need some assistance with that, go out to NicoleBurgessCoaching.com/appointments. I've got some limited times opened up at the beginning of January to do a quick little intake, and we can talk about whether I'm a match for you or not, and where you want to go, and then we'll go from there. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I truly hope more than anything that you give your last decade a review to see how far you've come along. And the next year, my goal is to also be even more fierce in my podcast episodes, kind of challenge more thinking as we go along, as I continue to challenge myself. And I think I've got some great people lined up to challenge some of those belief systems. We're going to talk about the magic of working with horses, becoming a book writer, ending the addiction with our smartphones, and so much more. So I look forward to continuing to be in your ears and hearing from you as well. And have a wonderful New Year's, and talk more with you in 2020. Take care. Thank you for listening. Curious about where you stand in perfectionism? Head over to NicoleBurgessCoaching.com/assessment. Take that short little assessment that I've created just for you and see how you do. No right or wrong, just an assessment. Take care.